I was an InterVarsity staff worker, there was, I was doing college ministry, and there was a student one time who I said, man, let's sit down and let's talk about the resurrection of Jesus. Let's really go through that. So I remember being in the Marshall Center. I remember being on some couches and just sitting them down and saying, all right, man, let's go through it. Let's hit this thing. I was like, man, how do you know that you were born from your mother? I said, I don't know. He's like, I mean, my mom would tell me. I said, well, how do you prove that, though? How do you know she's not lying? How do you know she's not brainwashed? How do you know you didn't come from a stork or an alien just dropped you off and then said, how do you know it's not a conspiracy? That you were like a test tube baby and you were like grown in a lab or something like that. How do you know? He's like, well, there's the birth certificate. Okay, well, that's not proof. That's a piece of evidence. So I'm like sitting him down and just like, what we need for history, we can't prove history, but we can look at the evidence and give an explanation. Give what probably has happened. What is the most plausible explanation for the evidence, the historical evidence? I said, man, brother, he was sitting there. I said, man, look him right in the eye. I said, we have evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. We have historical evidence. We can't prove it, but we have historical evidence. I said, man, did you know that Joseph of Arimathea buried Jesus? That is a historical fact. Like atheists and Christians alike believe Joseph of Arimathea actually buried Jesus. There's no competing stories in history. Why would you make a Sanhedrin member a hero? So the guy, the political body that just killed Jesus, you just made one of them to be a hero. It's kind of like saying after ISIS beheaded your friend, you make a story about an ISIS member doing something really awesome, like honoring Jesus. You don't do that. You don't make that up. And so this is one of the historical facts. I said, man, on top of that, the first witnesses were women. It's like, did you know that? Did you know that the first witnesses were women? And in the first century, you never made up that lie. Because women were not allowed to give testimony in court. Their testimonies weren't considered trustworthy. And so for the women to that be part of the story, that be part of the narrative, everybody believes that's a historical fact. Like the women discovered the empty tomb. And they believe that it's empty. The tomb is now empty because, well, if it wasn't empty, you could just produce the body. That would have been easy to solve, right? So the tomb was empty, and the women were the first discoverers of that. But, on top of that, there's all this evidence that people thought they saw Jesus. There's these appearances of Jesus all over the place. So I'm sitting down like, man, did you know that? Some of them saw him in groups. Some of them saw him like in one-on-one situations. But there's all these post-mortem appearances of Jesus. And this is a historical fact. And on top of it all, man, you have to explain the sudden and expedient rise of Christianity that differed from the Jewish faith, actually differed from every other faith. That before this time, before this moment in history, no one believed a Messiah would die, let alone rise from the dead. No one thought that. In fact, everybody knew, especially in the pagan world, that once you died, you stayed dead. They didn't need like CPR monitors. They didn't need CT scans. They didn't need brain waves. When you died, and you didn't come back. And if you did come back out of a coma, no one ever said you were victorious over death. They said, brother, you look tore up. I said, these are historical facts, man. The disciples radically departed from I believe. Have you heard that? Have you thought that? If I was there, I believe. Maybe not. Not from this passage. Peter Rollins was at a debate one time, and he was kind of confronted at one point. He said, man, Peter, you talk about the Bible a lot. You talk about the poor a lot. You talk about all this stuff, but you haven't talked about the resurrection. Peter, are you a denier of the resurrection? And he was like, whoa, like that's intense. I said, let me think about it. He's like, yeah, man, yeah. Yes, I am a denier of the resurrection. I deny the resurrection every time I'm greedy. Every time I'm selfish. Every time I withhold forgiveness, I deny the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then he said, yeah, and every once in a while, when I share my food with the hungry, I believe it. Every once in a while, I believe it. We, like the guards We take the bribe. We look to our own affairs. We deny the fact that we stand next to an empty tomb. We're so set on getting our spouse, or getting the degree, or getting the career, or if only I could get the raise or the car or the house, then I could live the resurrected life. If only. Or maybe you just want to be liked or accepted or noticed. But we're so busy, we're so captivated by our mess that we deny the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. One group of witnesses is distracted by themselves and their own affairs, and one is distracted to forget themselves. And there are many distractions to help us forget the risen King, aren't there? This is kind of like those mountaintop experiences. You ever been to those conferences where you're like, man, the risen Jesus is just like so clear to me. He's spoken to me. Worship was awesome. You guys know what I'm talking about? Where you just feel, you know your life is going to be different, right? Nothing's going to be the same. And then what happens? You go home, you go to work, the dirty dishes are still there, clogged toilet, you got those stresses, you got the mortgage, you got the car payments, and there's so many distractions to help us forget the risen King. Tony Campolo tells a story about going to Haiti. He did a medical mission. He took a bunch of students with him, and this guy Charlie was with him. Charlie was a medical student, and they were doing the medical outreach, and they went to a clinic. One doctor, 2 nurses, 300 patients. Over the course of a day, and it was an exhausting day, they saw 72 of those patients. And Charlie was devastated. Charlie was upset by this. Charlie thought it was wrong. He told Tony, he said, Tony, I'm coming back here, man. I'm coming back here. This is not right. I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to become a doctor, and I'm coming back here. God has called me. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to live. I'm going to bring healing to this land. Wait and see. A number of years later, Tony bumped into Charlie on the streets of New York City. Started having lunch. And to his credit, Charlie did become a doctor, but not the kind that makes sense. He's the kind that augments things. Cosmetic surgery. And Charlie was telling Tony, say, man, I'm doing all these great things. I'm part of this church, and I'm a part of these committees, and I'm giving all this money away. I'm a rich man. And Tony says, man, you better stop right there. He's like, what happened to you, man? You had a dream. You had a calling from God. And you sold it out. For what? A jacuzzi and a Porsche? How do you sell out the empty tomb and deny the resurrection? In this world, there are many distractions that help us deny the empty tomb. But though distractions help us deny the risen King, love, I believe, makes us messengers. We also see that in this passage. The women show us the way. Thank you, ladies. Just give it up for the women. They always show us the way back to Jesus. Always true, always faithful. The women show us the way. They go looking for Jesus. Do you notice that in the passage? Not the men, not the disciples. It's the women. Why do they go looking for Jesus? Because they love him. They fall at his feet. They clasp at his feet. Why? Because they love him. They go there. They don't expect him to be alive because they love him. And though there's lots of distractions, there's an angel, there's some freaky guards, right? There's joy and there's fear. A million distractions. They fall at his feet. They worship him because they love him. And from the place of love, get this, from the place of love, not duty, not fear or obligation, they are sent as messengers. Go and tell my brothers. Go and tell them. We can't help but focus on what we love. I have a dog. I've told you about him before. He's like an attack dog, but really sweet. He's about this tall. He's about 55 pounds, black, really sleek, kind of looks like a greyhound mixed with a Labrador, like you mash those things up, and he's really fast. And I have these neighbors across the street. Now they live, it's kind of like in our neighborhood, it's like the gated community of our neighborhood. Like the Ybor neighborhood is not gated in any way. People just like walk through your yards and it doesn't matter, right? But this one household is entirely gated. They have this iron gate, and you literally cannot get to them. I've been living there for months. I had not met them yet. There was no opportunity for me to meet them. I'd have to like break into their house to meet these people, which as a missionary, that's not a good idea. Just, write that down. That's my tip for the day. As a missionary, don't break into other people's houses, okay? Probably going to get shot. They have chickens. These chickens, they just roam the neighborhood. They're like Ybor chickens. So they understand the neighborhood. They're like, yeah, gates, what are gates? And they just like go wherever they want. And so they're in my yard, and they're like eating the bugs and eating the worms and stuff like that. And they're quite industrious, man. They're like cleaning up my yard and stuff. It was really cool. This one day, all I see out of the corner of my eye is this black blur coming from my front door. The front door was open, and I see Cheddar go after these chickens. Like he is just going for it. I mean, as fast as he can. You don't understand. The dog gets low. You know what I'm talking about? When the dog's like, it's attack mode. He's like Transformers, like, attack mode. And he goes for the chicken, and he gets one of them. And he's holding the chicken in his mouth. I mean, the chicken flies up, and he's like, and there's this chicken like, twitching in his mouth, and he's like, ah. It was pretty incredible to watch the hunter do his thing, right? But of course, I'm like, these are my neighbors I haven't met. I'm like, holy crap, what a horrible thing to have. So I'm like running across the street. I'm like, Cheddar, release. And Cheddar usually listens, but he's not listening. And he knows what's coming. He knows I'm going to come and kick him. Now, he's a big dog. He'll survive. If you're like the animal granola chewing lovers, here. He's a big dog. He'll survive. But he knows I'm going to come and I'm going to kick him. Okay? That's what's going to happen because he's not listening to me, right? Don't let me watch your dog. That's the moral of the story is don't let me do it. So he's looking at you. I wish I had a picture. You should have seen him. He was like looking up at me out of the corner of the eye. He knows it's coming. He knows I'm about to lay the boom on this dog. And I'm like, let go. And I'm coming up to him. And he's just like, but I love chicken. And he lays into the chicken. He knows he's going to get kicked across the street. And he's just like, I don't care. I love chicken. He just goes into this chicken. The chicken's tore up, super sad. And we had, of course, the end of the story is like, we're like, oh, chicken. We can't get into the house to tell you, well, you just killed your chicken. So we just laid it by the road and ran off. We just like put it there like, what do you do? You shouldn't put an 8-foot gate up. Love for chicken. Help Cheddar focus beyond fear and the worries of getting his butt kicked. Love helps us focus, man. And some of us need to love Jesus as much as we love fried chicken. I'm just saying, that we have our own ways of idolatry. I know when Maya was born, it was like that. I know when Maya came out, and that was she's my firstborn 14 years ago. On Father's Day, she was born to me, and she came out, and in the hospital, there's like 17, that's not a private moment if you're like in the hospital giving birth. It's like, you just want to go to the door. Does anybody else want to come in? Because it's open season right now. Just like, come on in, Push, and everybody's there watching. Baby comes out, there's monitors, there's machines, there's doctors, there's nurses, people are running around. And my eyes were only for her, though, because I loved her. There was 100 distractions, but my eyes were on her because I loved her. And the same thing when Isaiah came out. That boy came out peeing on his own mother. Like, at least we know it works, And Jessica was like, I don't care. Give me my baby. So she held him while he It's just like, I don't care. Give me my baby. One group is distracted away from worship by themselves, their bank accounts, their positions of power, and the other group is distracted by their love for the one who is to be worshiped because they love him. Guys, do you go looking for Jesus early in the morning? Do you go looking to anoint him with your praises? Asking, God, where are you? Where are you, Jesus? I want to find you. I want to be next to you. I want to gaze upon your face. I want to see your beauty. Do we go looking for Jesus in the morning? Not out of obligation, not out of fear, not out of, I want to be a better Christian, but because we love him. Will we turn away from being guards, turn from our distractions, and turn from denying the empty tomb, and become those who look for Jesus because we love him? It's time to turn our gaze away from ourselves and behold the risen one. The tomb is empty, and it's time to be distracted by him, guys. He is risen. The tomb is empty, and it's time to be distracted by him. He is risen. Will you love the risen Jesus? Look upon him, look for him, and forget yourself. What do we do with the risen King? What do we do with the risen King? We know the truth, but cover it up with lies. This is another possibility from this passage. We know the truth, but we start telling lies about it because it's easier and safer to believe a lie. The lie that the guards perpetuate, the chief priests perpetuate, the elders perpetuate, allows for the Jewish authorities to keep the status quo. Business as usual. It allows for the Roman government to continue to oppress and exploit people. Guys, the lies continue the merry-go-round of exploitation and consumerism and materialism and hatred and unforgiveness around, and nothing changes. But hope is birthed in that empty tomb. And if it's true that Jesus rose, then the revolution has begun. And we could get off the merry-go-round. If it's true, then everything changes in the school systems, the business plans, the police forces, the prison systems, job equity, now have a risen king that they have to submit to. And the threat of death, which maintains a lot of these systems of exploitation, perpetuates these worldly ideas, has lost its sting. He is risen. And of course, the world and its systems are convulsing in this passage, thrashing to keep everything the same, thrashing to keep the status quo. And so it's easier to believe the lie. Easier to believe the lie than the truth. I had this friend, Ralph. He's a Cuban exile, fled from Cuba. He's an older man. Fled from Cuba from Castro when he was I think he was 12 years old. And at some point, he moved to New York City, became an accountant, became actually quite wealthy. And he sat me down over breakfast one morning, and he told me about his suicide attempt. And he said, Jeremy, I was living in New York City, and I was miserable. My life was at an end. I lost my wife. I lost my business. I was bankrupt. And so there was this storm in New York City, so to the point where no one else was left in the city. Everybody had left the city. And it was like the aftermath of the storm. You know what I'm talking about? The hurricane survivors. It's kind of like the hurricane comes and no one's going outside, it's completely empty. So imagine New York City, usually full of people, completely empty. He knew no one would be there. So what he did, he's grabbed his nice gun, and Ralph does everything nice. So he had this chrome polished, nice, 9mm, and he said, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it to my place of work in the city, and I'm going to shoot myself. And they'll just have to find me and deal with it on Monday morning. So he goes there. He starts acting out the plan. Shows up to his office. He's getting a drink. I think he had some whiskey or something like that. So he's pounding back a few. And he hears a knock on his door. And he's kind of whoa, what's going on here? Who's here? No one's in the city. Who's here? Opens up the door. It's this friend he hasn't seen for a couple years. Friend shows up at the door. He says, Ralph, man, why don't we go for a walk? He's like, what? She said, man, come on, come with me. Let's go for a walk. I said, okay. And they walk around the city. He said they walked around the city for hours and hours and hours. Just walked around, talked about life, talked about everything, what's going on. Guy walked him back up to his office, got to the door, looked Ralph in the eye and said, are you okay now? Are you okay now? Ralph says, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I am. He shut the door. That guy was a Christian who'd been praying for Ralph for like 10 years to come to know Jesus. The thing I find most interesting about this miraculous encounter of God coming and actually literally saving this man's life, intervening, showing up, delivering a believer on his doorstep. The most amazing thing to me is that he didn't believe in Jesus. It took Ralph another 25 years before he had faith in Jesus. 25 years. Because it was easier to believe that it was accidental. It was easier to believe it was a coincidence, that it was fate, so that he might be able to continue the status quo of his life. It was easier for Ralph. But if the tomb was really empty, and Jesus was really pursuing him, it would have wrecked Ralph. It would have disassembled his life. And so it was easier for him to believe the lie. I think that's true for us as well. God does amazing things in our lives, but it's easier to believe the lie. Our burdens have been with us so long that we call them normal. We just had a prayer meeting for our house church on Friday. Callie was there, and she's like, you know what? Can you guys pray for my ankle? I rolled it like 7 years ago, and I just realized tonight I've stopped asking for healing. It bothers me. I can't run on it. There's some scar tissue in there. I just don't even ask anymore. I don't even believe. It's easier to believe God won't heal you than to believe that He might and to ask for it. Guys, it's easier and safer to believe the lie that He will not really take care of us and we have to take care of ourselves. It's easier to believe that God is like our earthly fathers with all their spite and absentee love. It's safer to believe that God is disappointed in you rather than to be freed by His overwhelming love for you. It's easier to believe that that family member is really that lost. It's easier to believe that that friend is no longer in reach. They're out of reach. They're beyond hope. It's easier to believe these things. It's easier to believe our past mistakes will forever haunt us, that the gate of our self-made prison has no key. It's easier to believe these things. Easier to believe the lies that the tomb is shut, that the grave is closed. And what do you do with the risen King, though? You cry out for Him to open the tombs. You cry out for Him to open the tombs. He did it once, and now He's in the business, guys. He holds the keys to death and Hades. We cry out. Yes, life has its impossibilities, but it was also impossible for a dead Jewish man executed by crucifixion to get up and walk out of a borrowed tomb. And so we cry out for Jesus to move stones, to open doors, and to heal diseases. We ask Him to bring prophetic insight to teachers, man. We need divine wisdom to social workers. We need healing powers to come upon nurses. We're asking for the Skyway Bridge, the legacy, to be changed from the number 4 destination for suicides in the country. We're asking for the police forces to humble themselves. We're asking for the sex industry to be dismantled. Guys, we're asking for doors to be opened. They seemed locked. They seemed impossible. But Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus rose from the dead. We cry out to the risen King to establish His good kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. Stop believing the lie that the grave is shut. He is risen. I think the lie that maybe really haunts us the most, and I think pops out of this passage, is that we believe the lie that we're disqualified from being kingdom agents. We believe that our fear and our doubt disqualifies you. But look at this passage again. Learn from this passage. Your fears and your doubts do not qualify you from being kingdom agents. Both the women are fearful. The disciples doubt. They're both sent. They're both sent. The guards and the priests, they have the fancy business cards. It says they should be trusted. It says their testimony should be valid. That they know something about religion. They know something about messiahs, how the Messiah is really supposed to come. They have the fancy business cards, don't they? And the women in the first century, they're not deemed trustworthy in court. Their testimony is not valid. The disciples are uneducated. They've all failed out of rabbi school. They're just regular, everyday people, man. When you look at these people on paper, they're the worst. They're the worst. A marketing department would not score them well to sell a product. You would pick them last on your kickball team. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That elementary, like, who is the worst? You will never actually make contact with your foot and the ball. Pick you last. There's 100 reasons why they should be disqualified. Yet they're sent as kingdom agents, aren't they? They were sent into a dying world to go and tell with their lives, Jesus is risen. Guys, in this passage, this is the day where credentials and confirmation cease to be the definition of the qualified. The guards are not reliable witnesses, the women are. The chief priests and elders are no longer the teachers, the uneducated disciples are. And to be honest, this week, this message, I am ecstatic about this. Because to be honest, I should also be disqualified. And I have no right to preach the good news, talk about grace, talk about forgiveness, to talk about peace that the kingdom brings. I am disqualified from this message. I coach soccer for a city park. I've done it for the past few years, coach my kids, and really just want to be a blessing. Want to kind of like redeem the city and just be a part of it and kind of incarnate and all those missiological concepts you guys know about, right? Like be there and walk with people and just love people and rub elbows and just love these kids and love the parents, and it's really grown on me, and I've grown on some of the parents. In fact, they call me now and they say, man, if you're coaching, my kid's back in, and if you're not coaching, we're not playing. They want me to coach. And I try to create a culture of what I call HELP. It's an acronym. It means humility, encouragement, love, and perseverance. And I try to create a culture of that. And I have zero tolerance for what I call biting your other players. You know how it is on a team sport. Somebody makes a bad play or the thing's not going the way you want it. And what do? You start yelling at your teammates. Why don't you pass me the ball? What are you doing? Type of thing, right? I have zero tolerance for it because I don't think it actually builds team. I don't think it loves. I don't think it helps. I don't think there's humility in that. And so I'm like, are you biting your friend? Are you biting your teammates right now? If you are, go take a lap. I have zero tolerance for it. This is the culture I've built. I've had my own experiences with abusive coaches in my past, so this is kind of part of why I'm very passionate about this. I've been in that place where those authority figures have kind of really like just nailed me and like over and over again and no affirmation and just really like crushed me. You guys know what I'm talking about? Where those, it's like, whatever. The names don't hurt me, right? That whole like little rhyme. I can't actually remember it right now. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never. But actually, they do hurt. It hurts a lot. and you can see children when that happens to them. You can see them kind of implode. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? When they're belittled. So I have zero tolerance for this. I'm very passionate about it. Just yesterday, opening day, one of the directors of the park, he came over to kind of help me coach. And, he's kind of one of the directors of the city park. But this is the team I've been coaching. This is the culture I've been building. And there was this one young woman who was a young girl. She's like 9 years old. And you can tell, like, this is their first time playing. She's very insecure. She doesn't really know what's going on. The game is a lot different than the practice. You know what I'm saying? So she's just kind of like deer in the headlights, like, holy crap, what's happening right now? And you could tell, like, she's kind of sensitive about it. Like, she wants to do a good job, but she feels like she can't because she doesn't really know what's happening. So I'm calling her. I was like, it's okay, baby girl. You know, I always call them baby girls and baby boys and stuff like that. It's kind of weird. It's like a Bernie Mac holdover, you know? Baby girl, come here, you know? So, you guys know what Bernie Mac, God rest his soul, you know? Baby girl, I was like, it's okay. Just listen to my voice. Just listen to my voice. Just run up and down this field. We'll get through this, you know? And then I send her on, and the game's going on. And at one point, I'm instructing, I'm kind of like telling the kid, you know, where to go and positioning and stuff like that, because that's the live coaching, right? And I see this girl. She's kind of in my line of sight. And I hear all of a sudden the coach yelling, "What do you think you're doing? What's wrong with you? Be aggressive." And he starts yelling, he starts belittling this child. And I see her with my own eyes just get crushed. And I tell you, in that moment, with all that I am, with all my fury and wrath, I turned to him. And me and him had it out. And it was a big deal. I was like, "Don't you ever shout at my players! I will sit you down." We started blowing up on each other. And I started having it out with him. He started having it out with me. Out in front of all these kids. And guys, to my shame, I was this close to violence on this man. I was fantasizing about it as I was yelling at him. It is to my shame. There's ways to do it differently. Should maybe pull them aside, confronted them differently, but publicly, shaming, yelling at him. It's to my shame that I'm still a violent man. That something's broken in me. Now, I'm not qualified to speak about the kingdom. It's embarrassing, it's humbling to know that I'm still this close to losing control. This close to assault. After all the books I've read, after all the Bible studies I've done, all the sermons I've prepped, I too need a risen Messiah to come and rescue me. I am not qualified to speak about this kingdom. I am not good enough to preach about his goodness or to deliver the announcement that new creation has begun. And I feel in my bones, guys, I live Romans 7. The good that I want to do, I don't do. Do you guys know this passage? The things I don't want to do, those are the things I do. I delight in God's law, but evil is right there with me. And I want to protect this baby girl, man. I want to protect these players, and I want to build them up and affirm them and bless their lives and be a part of this league. And evil is with me. Brokenness is with me. And I like to say I do it differently. I know there's ways to do it differently. And I'll tell you, I do it the same again. Like something's broken in me, guys. Like I know I should do it different. But I'm broken. I want to do it different. But evil is with me. Who will save me from myself, Paul says. Thanks be to God through our Lord Jesus Christ. And that beautiful transition from Romans 7 to Romans 8. Who will save me? Now there is no condemnation for those who are in Jesus Christ. And how do you know that? How do you know there's no condemnation? Because later in Romans 8, he says he's adopted you. He's put his spirit inside of you. You're his. And now, because you're his, because he's adopted you and me, we are more than conquerors. We're secure. If God is for me, if God is with me, if God is inside of me, who can be against me? Who can accuse me? You have to understand, I'm still that Romans 7 man. And yet, I'm also that Romans 8 man. More than a conqueror. who's broken. Your fear and your doubt don't disqualify you from being a kingdom agent. He promises to be with us, guys. His presence always to be with us, to never leave us. And throughout the entire biblical narrative, whenever God promises His presence, He promises it to inadequate followers. That's who gets His presence. People who can't get the job done. That's who gets to walk with Him. That's who gets adopted. People who can't save themselves. So yes, you have capacity issues. Yes, dark times will hit you. Yes, you don't deserve to even utter His name in prayer. But you're also called. And more importantly, you're His. He's the one who does the adoption. We're more than conquerors because His seal is on us. Not because we're strong, but because He is good to us. What do you do with the risen King? Love Him. Cry out for Him to break through those empty tombs. And let Him qualify you and send you with His presence. It's His authority. He chooses to send you and me to go and tell Jesus has risen. This morning as we come to the table, I think for some of us we're asking for God to increase our love for Him. And for some of us we need to be asking for a breakthrough through the lie. And some of us need to be sent to go and tell our brothers and sisters that Jesus has risen. So I received from the Lord. I pass on what I received from the Lord. The Lord Jesus, the night He was betrayed, took the bread. When He had given thanks, He broke it, saying, "This is my body. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, He took the cup, said, "This is the new covenant in my blood. Whenever you do this in remembrance of me." For when you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you declare to the world that Jesus was crucified for them. And with your life, you show that He did not stay dead, but has risen for them as well. Guys, come when you're ready. The body and blood of Jesus given for you.